real shame, but please do be brave. Put your video on so I can see you. So listen, Karine gave me a lovely introduction. There's a few more of you coming on now. And like Karine said, I think I've had quite an interesting career in technology. So I want to tell you a little bit about some of my roles in tech and some of the other roles that people like yourselves might end up doing in the future, and just some little tips at the end. So there we go. So just to start off, you might be surprised to hear, but I actually do not have a technology qualification like a lot of you are studying for now. I actually have a Bachelor of Pharmacy. So I actually started my career as a pharmacist. That's a picture of me in more recent years. I won't tell you who the employer is, but you'll get the connection when I go to further on in my talk. But yes, I actually was briefly a pharmacist and then decided to take a career change. And basically, I joined Accenture. I'm sure some of you may have heard of Accenture, a massive global management consultancy. And really, it was Accenture where I cut my teeth in terms of learning about technology. And they actually taught me how to code. Now, again, probably unlike some of you on the call, I wasn't particularly good at coding, but I still reference that knowledge in my career even today. And basically what it helped me do is understand how systems are put together. So very, very useful background. So I did quite a few years at Accenture, but my first what I call line role when I wasn't actually a management consultant anymore, but permanently employed for one company, was actually Sainsbury's. And the picture in the middle is the beautiful head office at Holborn Circus. And in fact, a little fact for you, that is actually some of London's most expensive office space. And I'll tell you why. When you walk in to the entrance, a third of the building is just air. You literally, it's like a giant atrium and you can see right to the top of the building. Very, very impressive. But the part of the building I wanted to just focus on today, if you look at the picture in the bottom right hand side corner, a few years ago, Sainsbury's decided that they wanted to become more digital. And a few years ago, actually, a lot of people didn't really understand what digital meant. But the first thing they did is build a digital lab. So they dug into the basement and they created, you can just about see lots of glass, some exposed bricks, sort of funky working spaces. And we, at the time, brought in lots and lots of technically skilled people, and we basically got them building digital products at Sainsbury's. So, for example, a lot of you may have gone into a supermarket these days, it's quite common, and used your mobile phone to scan your groceries and then pay. So a few years ago, that was quite innovative, and that was something that we built in the digital lab. So just to give you some insight into some of the people that were working at that digital lab and what some of their roles were. I know some of you are probably doing apprentices, some of you might be actually just studying for a degree, but basically we created Scrum teams. So some of you may be aware of Agile methodology. Good, I've got a nod from one of you, thank you very much. But basically you bring together about 7 to 9 people with the right skills to actually build a digital product, whether that might be a website, might be an app, or it even might be a part of a website. So typically at Sainsbury's, we had architects who might help and support the Scrum teams. Enterprise architects were looking at all the standards across everything that we built so that it was consistent. But the solution architects were really looking at about how different systems got put together. But within the Scrum teams, you obviously have people doing the front end and back end development. Product owners, again, I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but it's a very, very important role. So for example, if you were the product owner for this Scan and Go app, you would be responsible for the vision of where that product was going to go, the roadmap basically, and understanding the requirements. And then also, very often we had UX and UI designers. Now, interestingly enough, people who become UI designers, they're doing the digital design, the look and feel of the digital products, very often are not particularly technically inclined at all. And in fact, some of them come from very artistic backgrounds. And even UX designers who focus on the customer journey through a website or through an app, again, have to be much more much better at things like customer research than anything particularly technical. And of course, you also have people that do the testing and make sure that actually the products meet the original requirements as dictated or elicited by the product owners. So that is just an example of a team. And in that Sainsbury's lab, in that digital lab, we had multiple Scrum teams working on different parts of digital products or completely different digital projects. So hopefully that brings that to life for you a little bit. So that was basically my digital time when I was at Sainsbury's towards the end of my time there. But then I'm going to show you when I left Sainsbury's, I actually joined a company, and that is their head office. Could anybody, and you can drop it in chat or just take yourself off speaker and shout out, anybody, any idea what company I worked for next? Looking at that, looking at those pictures of Love Island.
ITV?
Good guess. Somebody else? What about Radoslav, he was on earlier? Any idea who that might be? The clue was in the title of my talk, lipstick. Actually, that is Superdrug's head office. And the reason why we had all these fancy balloons and blow up birds, etc., is Superdrug used to sponsor Love Island. So it's a very fun environment to work at Superdrug. And there we go. That is the connection with lipstick. And what I wanted to just talk to you about some interesting things that went on in technology at Superdrug is, of course, everybody is used to shopping online, but there are also lots of shops on the high street still, of course, albeit maybe people have not been doing as much physical shopping. But Superdrug's strategy very much was to encourage people into their stores to buy more of their products, more of their lipstick, by giving them in-store services. So you can see at the top, that's a new Superdrug that has been opened in the last couple of years. And so they would have nail bars, you know, eyebrow threading, but also you can see healthcare in the background, sometimes in-house nurses, for example, and obviously pharmacists as well. So these are things that you just can't get from a website, but will encourage customers into the store. So from a technology perspective, my team and I were developing products in store. So for example, a product where staff had a handheld terminal, and we're using that handheld terminal to order more makeup and lipstick testers, for example, of one of the products my team and I worked in. Of course, the bottom left-hand side picture is just a snapshot of their website. That's a very important part of Superdrug and the technology offering. But anybody, any idea why there is a man in the right-hand side corner holding a banana? Probably not. If you would like to find out, go on to Superdrug's website, go onto the healthcare section, and you'll see there are services. Whoops, don't know how I managed that. I must have sat on my keyboard. Right, what have I done here? Well, just to finish the story about the man with the banana, yes, they offer healthcare services to men, not just women. So I'm just going to try. Can you see the full screen there, Karine?
Yeah, I can see it. Yes. Can everyone else?
I don't quite. I've managed to get myself into view. Let's see if I can move the slides on by. Okay, I think I've managed to get out. So there we go. Very, very interesting from a technology perspective, blending physical and digital. And then maybe some of the guys on the call possibly may have been interested to hear about what I did at Arsenal Football Club. So of course, I was responsible for technology as the IT director of Arsenal Football Club up until actually very recently. And I'm sure a lot of you girls and guys will be familiar with, you know, the 11 blokes kicking a ball around on a pitch. And you might be able to imagine some of the technology which was used actually during a match. So, for example, you've got the big LED balls that flash adverts around. Obviously, that's technology. However, there's an awful lot which goes on in a football club that actually isn't just related to what goes on in the pitch. So try and move the slide forward here. there is a picture of the outside of the stadium, and as you can imagine, there's an awful lot of technology that runs a stadium. For example, fans having their tickets on their mobile phones now, going through turnstiles that recognises that they have bought a valid ticket and then will let them into the stadium. But one thing my team and I were involved in very, very recently is during COVID, obviously, when we were letting people into our restaurants, because there's actually a lot of fancy restaurants in the Emirates Stadium. In fact, one's even a Michelin star restaurant. My team and I introduced an app, which you may have seen in other restaurants at the moment, where people could order their meals from the app from their table. We called it the App Table Ordering App, but it's being used for all sorts of different things, like fans being able to order their pizza, for example, before half time from the app. And the important thing about that, having apps like that in a huge stadium, is connectivity. So Wi-Fi is very important, and mobile connectivity. So that's another important aspect of technology. Of course, not only do we have the men's first team playing on the pitch for Premier League games, but actually there is a training ground based by St Albans Station. For those of you who know that where it is, it's a place called Colney, and that is actually where the footballers train. And you can imagine there's an awful lot of technology there. For example, systems that capture medical data, because obviously we employ full-time doctors and nutritionists and masseuses and people like that. So a lot of medical data gets captured. But also, one of my favourite systems, I call it a footballer's bra, is when they're doing training sessions, they put on a bra and it basically captures physiological data about them. And so, for example, the coaches can understand how far they, how far they ran during a training session, or how fast their heart was beating, for example. So just, lots of technology that goes on from a training perspective. And we even have another site, which is an academy. And those of you may have heard of Bukayo Saka, because he is an England player, played it for England, but he plays for the first team. And he came up through our academy. So it's a specialised site with their own little training football pitches to try and develop the future stars for the football club. And of course, they have their own technology. So, for example, one of the systems my team and I rolled out was around safeguarding. So obviously, if you're dealing with children as young as 8 years old, you need a system to make sure you're keeping those children safe. So what else do we have? Right, so if you have a look at this picture at the bottom, you can see on the right hand side something looks a bit red. That's our box office, but just to the right of that were some doors, and I used to go up through those doors, up the steps and back to the left, and that's where we had our corporate offices. So for example, myself and the IT department worked there, but other functions like the partnership development team, finance team. And the reason why I explain this to you is, you can imagine, like any other company, they needed finance systems, HR systems. So there's no difference really there from any other company in terms of technology. Arsenal was also a retailer. Any idea how many physical shops Arsenal have? No idea. Only 2, actually. Only 2, but they are incredibly busy on a match day, as you can imagine. They probably take more transactions through their tills than some high street shops take in the whole of Christmas. And there, if you can imagine, from a technology perspective, everything you need in a normal retailer, whether that be Sainsbury's or Superdrug, you need exactly the same. You still need tills and all the relevant functionality to run things like warehouses, for example, to get the stock into the stores, as you would in any other retailer. And then finally, I just mentioned the fact that Arsenal also has an Arsenal Foundation, which is like a charity. And even charities need technology. So, for example, right next to the stadium is a little building with an indoor football pitch in it. It's called the Hub. And you even need technology to allow people to book that football club for people living in the local football club, but to book the football pitch, sorry, for people who'd like to play football indoors in the local community. So hopefully that just brings to life a little bit the fact that it doesn't matter what company you end up working in or where you might go in your future career. Everything is supported by technology these days. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of an insight into sort of the structure of the IT team that I had at Arsenal. And again, you might end up working in a similar team, but very broadly speaking, there are people there that help implement new systems. You've got business analysts understanding the requirements and project managers making sure that those systems are delivered on time and to budget. We did in-house development. Like I was involved with at Sainsbury's and Superdrug, but development team, and then again you'll have front-end developers, back-end developers, and again product owners. So I talked about product owners at Sainsbury's owning little solutions, like I said, whether it be parts of a website, a new little app, whatever it may be. Systems teams, these are really what I used to call very fondly the real techies, because they really were quite deeply involved in things like networking. So a lot of companies, I know everybody talks about the cloud and the cloud computing, but a lot of companies, especially if they've been around for a long time, will probably still have their own network, and you still need engineers that understand how that network works. You need people that understand how to administer the servers on those networks. But of course, increasingly, people either are buying off-the-shelf products that are managed by third parties, or even putting some of their own systems up in somebody else's data center, if you like. So you can also, there are roles around cloud engineering. And in fact, we're all on Teams today. And actually, some of the team were very familiar with the Microsoft Office 365 cloud-based environment in terms of how to configure that and how to exploit the functionality in there. And I just wanted to point out, there was one guy that his only job was to deal with physical infrastructure projects, whether that be expanding the Wi-Fi or upgrading the Wi-Fi, because obviously somebody needs to screw in the access points and make sure all the cabling is done, or just making sure that the comms room is patched appropriately. So that just gives you a little insight into that. And then finally, support team. I don't know if anybody work on an IT service desk, but actually some people start off working on an IT service desk and then they end up perhaps going into a different role. This is a very common career path I've seen. So people in the systems team, for example, had started in the support team, but they decided to specialize, for example, in networking. But basically, the support team is really like the service desk analysts, or sometimes they're called technical operations specialists, depending on what site they're on and what technology they're supporting. But very important that end users or people, well, end users using their laptops or whether they're using a system, have some support from people in the technology department when things go wrong, because unfortunately they do, as you all know, with technology, it doesn't always work all of the time. But hopefully that just gives you some insight into the sorts of roles again, that were found at Arsenal versus more of the digital team. I mean, there were all of those roles at Sainsbury's as well, but I was focusing more on some of the roles in the digital lab at Sainsbury's. So that gives you some insight. So I'm just going to come to my last slide, and maybe I might have some questions, but I think only one person's been brave enough to turn on the camera, so I'm not sure. But maybe, Karine, you can ask me some questions in the end. But I'm going to end with my last slide, because whatever you're doing, whether you're doing an apprenticeship or whether you're doing a degree, or even if you're doing some sort of training course, you are all accredited by TechSkills with the Tech Industry Gold accreditation. And the great thing about that is you are learning skills that companies like Sainsbury's, like Superdrug, like Arsenal actually really need, not just something that's very theoretical. And in fact, I read a very interesting statistic actually, that people that do generic computer science degrees are surprisingly not as employable as people perhaps do something a bit more focused and a bit more specialized around technology like you guys are doing. And the one thing that drew me to TechSkills, because I do support this company as as a member of the board of directors, is the fact that when I had a look at the curricula that some of you guys were doing, it wasn't just all about technology. There was soft skills and interpersonal skills involved as well. And I just wanted to say to all of you, if I look back on my career, I wasn't, like I said, the best coder. You know, I wouldn't be able to do some of the jobs that people have done in my teams, but what I think I have been able to do is exploit my softer skills. And whatever you are doing, even if you end up, you know, you're early on in your career on the service desk, or you're perhaps in a scrum team and you're coding, do not forget to try and develop relationships with people. Go for coffees with people, go and get to know them, because trust me, that will only do well for your career. And also when you are perhaps face something difficult whereby there's some resistance to the introduction of some new technology, or perhaps there's confusion around some requirements that you've been asked to develop, it's going to be so much easier to go and talk to people about those sorts of things if you've already got a bit of a relationship with them. So yeah, I just wanted to leave you with that thought. Whatever you do, do not forget about the softer side of skill, you know, softer side of relationships. It's really, really important. So there we go. I've come to the end of my slides. Shall I stop sharing the screen, or perhaps you could stop sharing?
I'll do that.
And I got, is that, who can I see there? Charlotte and Jade have come on the video. Brilliant, but nobody else has been brave enough to come on the video. So I do really, really appreciate that. But Charlotte or Jade, perhaps you may have some questions for me, or I hope so.
I've got a few kind of rolled into one. So women in tech, obviously it's not really a big thing at the moment. We're wanting more women in STEM, everything like that. How did you find, this is part A of the question, how did you find getting into technology? Was it something easy to do? And then also the second part of the question is, once you was in tech, how did you then progress up the career ladder? Women who are quite high up have a reputation, I guess, as being difficult leaders. And how did you kind of overcome that, I guess?
Really, really good question. So let me go back to the first bit. How did I get into tech? Now, remember, I got into tech a long time ago, right? To the point when people weren't even really talking about tech, in an IT department that was something that was stuck in a basement, right? Literally, I'm talking over 20 years ago, just to, yes, I am that old, but just to put it into context. But I basically did join technology almost by accident because I did say that I was a pharmacist. I decided quite quickly, only after a couple of years, that really I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a dispensary, and what the hell was I going to do with the rest of my career. And actually Accenture were very open-minded at that time and didn't care what degree somebody did. They were happy to welcome people into the company and train them in technology. And do you know what? They really were quite pioneering in that sense. And we are seeing a lot more of that now. A lot of companies are waking up to the fact that there is a skills shortage, and actually, does it matter what your background is? So that's the first thing. That's how I got into technology. But whether you know, some of you are actually studying technology, or some of you might even have different careers, there's such a demand for technology now that I don't think there should be any problems getting into the industry anymore. So that's the answer to your first part of your question. Second part, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of talk about women in tech. We are still, I say we are because there's some guys and girls on the call, but for the girls on the call, we are still quite underrepresented. All I can say in terms of why do I think I've managed to progress my career probably relates back to what I was saying about do not forget the softer side of skills, as well as, you know, of course, it's great to be an expert in, you know, in what you're doing. But I think the bit of advice I would say is focus on your strengths. And as it happened, like I said, I was never the best coder. You know, I was never going to be deeply technical. I was never going to be a technical expert, but I knew I was good with people. You know, I dealt a lot with the general public when I was a pharmacist. So I guess what I've done is always focused on my strengths, which is interesting because a lot of people, you know, when you get into the corporate life, you'll have an evaluation. A lot of companies do that, or a PDR they call it, or every 6 months or so they'll check in on how you're doing, and it's very much like you're great at this, this and this, but you need to focus on this, and you're not as good at this, and you could be better at that. But actually my advice is focus on your strengths. Now if you're sat there thinking, actually I'm not so good on the people side, but I'm very, very good technically, well, focus on that, focus on your strength. So hopefully that's something you could take away. Just think about what is it that you're really good at, because not everybody's good at everything, and just focus on that, and that will do you well. So thank you. Great questions, Jade. I've got is anyone? Oh, so John and Charlotte have been brave enough to come on the video. John, you put your hand up.
Hi, Christelle. I noticed you mentioned this Scrum. Did you use Scrum to work within your teams? So yeah, I just wanted to ask you, obviously the Scrum is within the Agile methodology, but did you work strictly to that methodology, or sometimes if you don't meet the goals, did you allow for some margin to you know what I mean? If you don't need that sprints, did you go on to be more flexible for the following sprint? Does that make sense?
So let me see if I've understood the question, but I think at the heart of your question is you're saying when, and I'm assuming a lot of you are familiar with the Agile methodology, are you saying, in my experience, have we always stuck rigidly to that methodology, or has there been some flexibility? That's a really excellent question, actually, John. I'm really glad you asked that. Is there anyone, and you know, does anyone want to put their hand up if they don't know? And don't be shy, because I don't know who you are, but is there anyone who just want me to say a few words about what Agile is before I answer that question? Is it worth it? Well, listen, okay. So basically, the traditional way of building systems used to be something called the waterfall methodology. So basically, let's go back to this, because I think most people have used an app in a supermarket or a shop, right, to scan their shopping, or at least they know what I'm talking about. Let's say, for example, somebody said, right, go away and build an app that a customer can use to scan their shopping and pay. In the waterfall methodology, basically, a load of requirements would effectively be written down up front. Right, I want it to have a checkout. I want the app to be able to add 2 cans of beans or 3 cans of beans without me scanning it 3 times, but by me pressing 3. Or another requirement might be, I'd like to be able to accept multiple methods of payment, so Amex as well as MasterCard as well as Visa. So several years ago, somebody would probably write down all of those requirements, and you know, software a few years ago was more difficult to develop. It was just a slower process, and it could be maybe a year later, out pops this app, and the person that asked for the requirements a year previously looks at the app and goes, oh, that's not what I asked for. Oh, no, I didn't think that. Oh, did I say Amex? No, I didn't mean Amex. Sorry, I meant MasterCard. And you can imagine, because the development life cycles were so long, by the time you actually delivered anything, it's almost like the requirements were redundant or had changed. And it was a very inefficient way of building systems. So the idea of Agile methodology is you don't try and build an entire system and scurry away and, you know, in a dark corner and build a system for a year. You build the system almost like iteratively, and by that I mean you might take a couple of requirements, build it, a little bit of the functionality, get the person that wants the system to say, yeah, that looks about right, and you do those in 2 weekly cycles called sprints, as John quite rightly said. And so you build the software gradually, and hopefully, even if it did still take a year, the chances are at the end of the year you're going to have actually something that you really wanted, because it's that iterative process and you're getting feedback throughout the development life cycle. Right, so that's, you know, Dummy's Guide to Agile. Did that make sense, Kevin? If you didn't know what Agile was, my explanation there. Right, so what John's question is, you know, how strictly do you follow this methodology? There is an entire course that you can go on, and you know, there's lots been written around exactly how you might structure the Scrum teams, what sort of reviews you might do, the regularity of discussions on the software. You know, there's lots and lots of things that have been written about the Scrum methodology. I would say the reality of it is that in my experience, my teams and I haven't always followed it to the letter. So, for example, certainly the Scrum methodology I got trained in said typically you'd have like 7 to 9 people in a Scrum team, all with the various different skills required. But actually, I've developed systems with a Scrum team of 4 people. It's just so happened that they've adopted multiple roles within that Scrum team. Or it might be that you say, oh, you need 2 weekly sprints. But somebody might decide, actually, in this particular case, we're going to do sprints, but we'll do them in 3-week cycles. So I would absolutely say, in my experience, it's never necessarily been to the letter, but the ethos around, you know, developing bits of software iteratively as you go, getting feedback, testing and learning is absolutely something that I have seen work very well. Does that answer your question, John? I know it's a bit of a long question, but I think it is a very good question, because when you're starting out in your career, you know, it's always easy to read something and think, oh, I have to follow that by the letter, but the reality is not always the same. Charlotte.
Hi there.
Yeah, but I've lost you again, Charlotte. Oh, no.
Hi.
You're there.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you and see you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's right. So you have quite varied experience in terms of industry, and it was interesting to hear the vast ways in which tech is used within football. I just wanted to ask whether there are any standout certifications that have supported your application to the various environments that you've worked in, or is it just a case of having the experience?
I think I missed one of your words. Is there a standout? What did you say, Charlotte?
Any standout certs, like certifications?
Oh, standout certifications. Again, oh my God, you guys have asked really good questions. Right. A lot of, if I look back on my career, a lot of it is experience. However, and again, this is one thing I would just say to you, technology moves all the time, right? John asked a great question about Scrum and Agile. I mean, that didn't really exist. Well, it probably did exist, but it wasn't popular until maybe a few years ago. Things are always changing. I mean, we've all heard about artificial intelligence, robotics, process automation, all these sort of acronyms and new bits of technology that are coming on board all the time. What I would say is, personally, I've always given myself the challenge to say, I am going to do a certification once a year. Once a year I'm going to do something. So actually, when I was in the Sainsbury's Digital Lab, I actually did a couple. I did a Scrum Master, I think it was called. I did an Agile Product Owner certification. As it happens, I'm just trying to think, when I was at Superdrug, I happened to do something on negotiation skills, which is not particularly technical, but as you get more senior in IT, you spend more and more time dealing with software vendors. You have to negotiate with them. And something that I did at Arsenal more recently, and maybe you have or haven't heard about this, but because we were very much using Microsoft, I did a course in, I have to think about now, it's the automation. My goodness, the word escapes me. Well, I took my team and anyhow, there is something you could do within Microsoft to basically stitch together the different applications. But I guess my point is, I've always focused on certification, but normally, you know, something that I think is very relevant to what I'm doing in my career at that time, and just to keep myself abreast of new things. Is that because you are thinking of doing a certification, Charlotte, or you are doing one, or?
So I'm an apprentice currently working on agile methodologies. I was thinking about doing the Scrum certifications.
I think you should. There we go. I mean, you shouldn't go mad. There needs to be a balance, right? You can't spend your whole life doing training courses. But to the question John was asking as well, that will be the theory. And then you have to think, okay, that's the theory. How do I actually apply it in practice? But no, absolutely. And if you have an opportunity through, you know, this apprenticeship you're doing, just go out and learn as much as you can. I mean, that you really should do that. I'd absolutely encourage that. So great question, Charlotte. Thank you. Somebody else has just come on the video. I don't think I know your name. Grey
Hello.
Jumper.
Yeah,
Hello.
Matthew. Hello.
Hi, Matthew.
Hi. Yeah, you were talking just then about changing between industries. Just wondering, what was your biggest challenge changing between industries? You've obviously gone from pharmacy into retail and then across into sport. And yeah, just wondering if there's any experiences you might have picked up of changing industries between that you've worked in. Obviously, you've stayed within technology, but the industries that the businesses work within, is there differences between them, or what was the biggest challenges?
That's, again, oh my goodness, I'm really impressed by the caliber of questions, Karin, really impressed. Great question. I mean, the first thing I would start off by saying is all of you guys are lucky, I think, to be starting out either learning about technology or starting out in a technology career, because the great thing about technology is it does apply to every industry. So I think I was saying to Karin yesterday, if you were all studying quantity surveying, I don't know if you know what that is, but there is such a thing, you're probably going to end up working in the construction industry. You know, when I studied pharmacy, I was pretty certain I was going to end up in the pharmacy industry. You study technology, you know, the world is your oyster, to be honest. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I don't think I have struggled in terms of changing industry, but what I think is really important is always to bring something from one industry into another industry. So when I went for my job interview at Arsenal, they knew I didn't know anything about football. They knew I knew about retail, so that was a tick, because like I said, they were a retailer. They knew I knew about corporate systems, because as I explained, almost every company you may end up working is going to have a finance department, an HR department, probably a corporate governance department, you know. And so they knew I'd have familiarization with those sorts of systems. But actually they were saying, well, you know what, we'd quite like someone to come in from a different industry that perhaps has a different perspective. And certainly I think that is what I did. Every time I've moved, I've said, okay, I brought something with me from the other industry, or brought my experience from another company, and then I tried to apply it to my next company. So yeah, I don't think it's been difficult. I mean, one thing I will say is I do get slightly frustrated sometimes when I hear somebody say, oh, I want somebody to work, you know, in technology, but they have to have done retail technology, or they have to have done, I don't know, football technology. And I'm like, do you really? Because at the end of the day, it's just technology, isn't it? So there we go. Just I haven't found it too bad, and just always think about what can you bring from one company to another, or one industry to another. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Great. It's good to hear from you.
We have got another question from Zoe that came on the chat. Zoe, if you want to speak, you can read through your question, or would you rather that I did that? Okay, I'll read it through. Women who work mostly from home risk seeing their careers stall. Now, workers are returning to the office in large numbers, according to the Bank of England economist Catherine Munn. How do you feel about this statement?
Ooh, I have read some of those articles as well, Zoe. It's interesting. I mean, I don't know if the guys want to hear this, but one day you're probably going to have families and wives as well. But I've more or less always worked, you know, throughout my working career, and had children. And there is always that challenge, I think, between your home life, whether you have children, there's still, you know, boilers to be fixed, and you know, there's always stuff going on at home. And I think what I have read is that women are finding it easier to manage their lives because they can balance their kids and everything and work by not going into the office. But I think the issue is if you never go into the office, this is just my personal view, right? This is an official view, but my personal view is you need to have a presence sometimes. Now, by that I mean, can you imagine if when I was at Superdrug, I just said, right, I'm never coming into the office, and everyone's like, well, where's our head of IT? I can't remember the last time I saw her. Does that mean she's not committed? Do we really know what she's doing while she's at home? I mean, I think companies are a bit more open-minded now because I think the pandemic has proved that we can work from home, but it's just difficult. I think I would just urge you, I think, to make sure that you do maintain that connection with your colleagues in a face-to-face environment. I'm not saying go back to the office 5 days a week, but I think it could be whether a guy or a girl, actually, if you never make the effort to go in and speak to people physically and have those, coffee conversations or corridor conversations perhaps that you don't have on video, I think you could lose out. So I think it's a very, very interesting question. But I think, all of you just try and have that physical, proper face-to-face connection with your colleagues would be my advice. And then I think there was one more. Was it John?
Yes, last question. So are you able to give me one skill or set of skills that have had the biggest impact into your career by having them?
Well, I think I'll just probably have to refer to what I said at the end of the presentation. And so at least by me saying it more than once, maybe if you remember nothing else from this talk, you'll remember that. But I think human relationships are important. And that is a skill in its own right. And some people are more extrovert and more comfortable. Going out and meeting people and chatting. I know that I happen to be fairly extrovert, so I'm comfortable. Some of you will be less so, and not. But it is a really important skill. Whether you are a network engineer, you're a software engineer, cloud engineer, product owner, whatever you end up doing, and some of your roles will change over time, right? You might start off doing one role and you might do something else. I would still keep coming back to the personal side of having a career and just how important it is. And go back to that picture I showed you. Go and spend time getting to know people, especially those people, I don't know if you've heard the term stakeholder, but basically those people that have a vested interest in either what you're developing or supporting or whatever. Those soft skills, I'd have to come back to those. So I could sit there and go, oh, it's because I'm just I'm just fabulous at configuring Microsoft Office 365, but that just wouldn't be true. Just don't forget that and make an effort, really, really make an effort, and it will see you well throughout your career, I think, whatever other skills you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go, Karin.
Right, thank you so much. Do we have any final questions? Anybody? But if not, I just want to say thank you. Oh yes, Sue. Hello, Sue.
Sue, hello.
Hi. I just want to build on that because through my career, I did work for the tech industry for 20 years, but in my career, that's absolutely the most top, the top advice. And yes, I think even if you're more of an introvert, it's something that you still will have people skills, and it is the way these degrees have been designed, both the degree apprenticeship and the different degrees have been built with that in mind. So there will be plenty of opportunity within your course to actually develop those skills by not attending a presentation that tells you about them, but actually you will be using them as you develop, as you do your degree. And I think that there are 4 pillars to our degrees, and they are technology, business, project management, and professional interpersonal skills. So they are so important. But that's why when you pop out the other side of these degrees, you will have those skills because the degrees have been built in that way. So I can't agree more with Christelle in actually making that point. Thanks, Karina.
That's brilliant. So if you guys remember nothing else, you might forget all about the football and the lipstick, but you'll remember about the soft skills, I think. I hope. That's great to hear. But no, you are lucky, I think, doing the tech industry gold courses that you're doing, because there's a lot of real life input, if you like, that has gone into what you're studying, which is really, really important.
Thank you very much, Christelle. Could everyone unmute themselves and give Christelle a round of applause, please?
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all, and thank you for your fab questions. Honestly, really impressive.
Thank you. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.